I'm so excited to welcome my next guest. She is the founder of the Vagina blog and host of the Vagina blog podcast. Please welcome April Davis.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you. We were just talking about you have a very busy life.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to just kind of say a little bit about yourself, and maybe how you got started with the Vagina blog and everything from there.
Yes. I'm busy because I have these 3 children and they sent them home and they want me to just raise them and take care of them myself. And
Imagine. Have you been homeschooling since March?
yes, and we're on summer, and I think we're going to be homeschooling again this fall because with our school system, I'm like, that's not anything to send them back to, and you're just going to end up having them do distance learning anday. So we might as well just declare ourselves homeschoolers.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. And it's just getting worse too. So where do you live?
I'm in southern Utah.
Oh, okay. And are
Yeah.
you married?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. My husband's
Okay.
here and yeah, I'm lucky that way. I've been married for 15 years. So
Wow, that's amazing. And how old are
yeah.
your kids?
I have an almost 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 3-year-old.
Wow. So you have your hands full.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
how long has the Vagina blog been going?
So the Vagina blog has been going, I'm 2.5 years in.
Okay, 2.5 years in. And it seems like it's a pretty big hit.
Yeah. I think we need the information so badly. We don't talk about it enough. We don't have a foundation. I think that's the other thing that's so difficult is, so I'm 35. I'm looking at fellow 35-year-olds. They have no foundation of like the sex ed that we received was so basic, so anatomical, and so like almost scary. Like it was a lot of like, if you don't do this, you'll get gonorrhea and die type stuff.
Yeah.
And so I just think we're missing we have this gap in knowledge. And I think everyone wants to fill that gap. They want to know. They want to know all the things. We want to know about how to better manage our period. And we want to know about how to have a more enjoyable sex life and everything in between, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I can absolutely relate because I grew up conservative Christian
Mm-hmm.
and we just didn't talk about it. I mean, I remember my mom sat down with me like with a book one time,
Mm-hmm.
and then sex ed in school was so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then it was just kind of like, don't have sex before marriage and then figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is, people say that like I grew up conservative Christian. We all did. Whether or not we observed the religion in our households, that's the baseline for like what we learn in school. It's, we have these very Puritan roots here in the United States, and that's really driven what kind of education we've received around any of this. And it's so frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's almost like underlying misogyny a little bit, that
Totally.
like, that men can do whatever they want and then women have these expectations. And
Mm-hmm.
okay, so what are, like, you kind of said this a little bit, but what are the main topics that you talk about in your blog and now in your podcast?
So we talk a lot about periods and cycles and the menstrual cycle. We talk a lot about sex and orgasms and what's normal. I also love to sneak in. So I didn't go over, my background is in birth actually.
Oh,
And yeah.
like a midwife?
So I actually worked as a birth assistant to a nurse midwife, and then
Okay.
I worked as a doula and a birth photographer. And so that is where my roots are. That's my foundation is birth. And so I try to sneak some birth in, but when I started the Vagina blog, I think sometimes people just go straight to birth, and it really, I don't want to say ostracizes, but it kind of does anybody who's not pregnant or having a baby at the time. They maybe don't take interest in that like they would if it was broader. So
Mm-hmm.
my goals for the Vagina blog were to make it broader and then sneak some of the birth and the breastfeeding stuff in, which I loved doing because I've reached an audience that maybe would never have been exposed to some of the information around birth and breastfeeding otherwise, except for, when they found themselves pregnant one day.
Yeah, and I can relate to that because I don't even know if I'm going to have kids. So I appreciate, and I listened to your episode about orgasms because that is something that so I didn't orgasm till I was like 25. And it was because my friend sent me a vibrator and I was married. And like, like my ex and I, like it was very uncomfortable. Like I tried talking about sex and it was a very uncomfortable thing. And I never masturbated. So I didn't know my body or like even really, this is kind of embarrassing to say, but like what the clitoris was.
That's not embarrassing. That is a complete failure on your parents' part, on our society's part, on our education system's part. And that's what's so frustrating is we're all walking around with this shame and this embarrassment around like not knowing these things. When was that information ever provided to you?
Right.
I mean, you really have to seek it out.
Yeah. And I still feel like I don't really understand it. I mean, like I've been with a few partners, but I mean, I was married for 8.5 years. We never figured it out. And I've had one ex-boyfriend for 3 months. We never really figured it out, And so I wanted to like dive in and talk about how to create healthy sexuality, especially with women. And, I probably have a majority of women listeners, but I do have quite a few male listeners. And so I want them to be able to understand too, from like our side, kind of what's going on in our head and in our bodies, and we don't even know. So how are they supposed to know?
That's the biggest thing. If we don't even know, how are they supposed to know? They don't have vulvas. They don't have vaginas. Like how are they supposed to know?
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure on men to like make the woman orgasm, but it doesn't really work that way because like, first of all, like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming penetrative orgasms don't happen as often as clitoral orgasms.
That totally depends on the person, but yes, statistically speaking, that is the case.
Okay. And then like, it's like when you say like, okay, yeah, I'm not orgasming a lot, it's almost like people automatically blame the man. Like, well, what is he doing wrong? But really it's just a lack of information about your body and maybe some factors like stress and like anxiety when it comes to sex or pressure and all of that. So, I don't know. How do you want to kind of start with that in terms of like creating a healthy sexuality for women?
I think the biggest thing that we need to maybe grab onto and remember is that your orgasm is your responsibility. And I don't think women are told that often enough. And it's really frustrating because when it comes to sex, it feels like a lot of it is our responsibility, right? Our orgasms are our responsibility. Not getting pregnant is our responsibility. Like it can kind of be a little overwhelming sometimes, but your orgasm is your responsibility. And when I see that, it doesn't mean that I don't think your partner can help you get there. Obviously that needs to be, part of their job as well. It's all fun for everybody involved, right? But it is your job to try and learn how to get into a mindset and a headspace where you are open to having an orgasm. I really don't think we talk about that enough. Learn how to say yes or to say no when things are not working, when they are. Never, ever, ever fake orgasms. Ever. That it just should never happen. All you're doing is giving your partner evidence that the thing that they're doing is working when you fake an orgasm. You are lying to your partner about the most intimate part of like your lives. And on top of it, like I said, you're giving them this feedback. So now they are learning, oh, if I do this, they'll have an orgasm. And obviously we're speaking, to really traditional gender roles here, male and female.
Right, of course. Yes.
That is such a brutal thing to do to your partner. It's such a horribly intimate area to lie. It's just not okay to lie to your partner in that way anyway. And then beyond it, you're only hurting yourself in the long run because you're just teaching your partner how to not give you an orgasm.
Yeah, absolutely. So can we talk about orgasms a little bit and kind of like some tips and tools? Like, actually, can you just kind of break down the clitoris? Because I have a question.
Yes.
So this is very personal. You're welcome, listeners. But I feel like so the clitoris, like the bulb of the clitoris,
Mm-hmm.
mine is like hurts when it's touched. Like it's super sensitive. But
Okay.
from what I understand, a lot of women, by touching the bulb, that's able to get them off.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your thoughts on that? Like, why is that?
That's just you. I mean, that's the thing that's so hard. I think we just need to get told over and over again, like, what you're going through is normal. It's normal. It's normal. You're normal because you are normal. And what works for you may not work for someone else and vice versa, you know? So hang on to that. For you, stimulation might look more, I think lubrication is going to be really key for you. I would highly recommend, because having like that area now be slippery instead of not is
Right.
going to help that be not such a blunt type of stimulation, you know?
Yeah.
Beyond that, you might like things like maybe a vibrator over undies or over clothes type of stimulation. You might like more internal G-spot, which is actually just more of your clitoris, which is so interesting type stimulation. And so play with that. I mean, that's
so I do use a vibrator, and I use it on the outside, like the hood, right?
Yeah.
But my hang up is that I've never been able to orgasm without a vibrator.
Okay.
So how do you, like, for women who maybe that's also the same for them, is that okay? Is that something that they should explore and play with, though, to try and do something? Okay.
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of, when it comes down to any of this, going curious. We sometimes really go into, sexual experiences very goal oriented. And instead of like having an orgasm be the goal, I always recommend follow pleasure. What feels good? What is feeling nice? What's working? Follow pleasure and going curious. And be willing to say to your partner, no, that's not working. Or, ooh, I love that. Keep kind of moving with that. Ooh, what if we tried this? What if we tried this toy? What if we tried this type of stimulation? What if we tried this position with this toy? There's so many options. And if you go into it really curious and open, I feel like you're in a much better headspace to have things kind of work out. And it doesn't mean that you're going to have an orgasm every single time. It might just be like, ooh, remember how we were kind of playing with this last time? I want to play with that more. I want to go down this path more and see if, like, what if we did this and this, you know?
Yeah.
I reference the book Come As You Are a lot. It's by Emily Nagoski. She is incredible. The book is incredible. It's so helpful. She talks a lot about this being in this type of headspace going into it, and being curious and following pleasure. She also talks a lot about libido. We talk so much about it being a sex drive, when in reality, it's more of an accelerator and a brake. Some people have a very sensitive brake. So it might be, yes, I'm in the mood, but this one thing turned on my brake. This, I can't stop thinking about laundry, break. Can't stop thinking about kids not being asleep quite yet, break. Or we might have a really sensitive accelerator, like, ooh, the wind hit me just right. I'm ready to go right now. Some people have both. They have an easy accelerator, but also a very sensitive brake. And some people have neither. They're both really dull, and it's super easy for them to go one way or the other. And so everyone's a little bit different. And we're all different through all different seasons of our life too. As I've, been pregnant, gone through postpartum, had kids, like it's birth controls I've been on, everything else. Like it's changed me as a sexual critter throughout my life. I've had a completely different libido. So we have to recognize that we might have to surf through all different seasons as well, and be willing to go in curious. This is a life skill that you may have easy orgasms right now and things might go great, but after that birth of your first kid, or the death of a loved one, or X, Y, and Z that's naturally going to happen to you in your life, you may have to find that again. So having the skill set of going in curious and of learning, it's always going to serve you.
What would your advice be for maybe partners who they've never had conversations about sex and now they want to have conversations about sex, and maybe the guy is a little sensitive, has a little bit of kind of that male ego, what's it called? The fragile ego or whatever. Like, what are some good ways to bring up those conversations without offending the partner or, kind of creating like strife in the relationship?
I think it's just really important to just do it. Rip off the Band-Aid and have the discussion, and don't do it at 11 o'clock at night when someone has a boner. Do it at lunch in public. You know what I mean? Because that's the problem, is everyone tries to have this discussion at night when someone wants to have sex. It's not a good time to have a talk about your sex life. It's just not. You're tired. I don't think straight when I'm aroused either. You know what I mean? That's not a good time to talk about your sex life. A good time to talk about it is at lunch when you can't have sex with each other because you're getting aroused about what you're talking about, and to actually talk it all the way through and say, hey, I am struggling in this area, or I really would like to try this, or this is not working for me, but maybe this will work for me, or I have some ideas, or I want to talk to you about how are you feeling about our sex life? What could we be doing better? What could, and I'm a big fan, compromise. Maybe there's stuff that they'd like to do that you're not doing that you could put on the table. You know what I mean? Like work through some of those things. The blessing that the thing that's great about talking to your partner about sex, when you get comfortable talking to your partner about sex, you now are so much better prepared to talk to your kids about sex. Because you've used the word penis and vulva and vagina, and you've had conversations about those body parts and about these acts and these things. So when your kids start to ask about, Mom, what is a blowjob? What does that mean? You can be like, well, let me explain it to you in completely normal terms, because I'm well practiced in talking about this stuff.
What would be some things not to say?
Oh, that's a really great question. And here's another thing. I cannot recommend seeing a sex therapist enough. If you feel like this is a difficult conversation or something you just don't quite know how to dive into and you just can't quite do it, go to a sex therapist. Go, even a marriage and family therapist is going to have some great insight and be able to mediate between you guys and talk things through. In my early marriage, I found us in marriage counseling, and I'm so, so glad that we went. And sex was a big topic for us in counseling. And it was great because our counselor was able to kind of give us some words and some goals and talk us through some of those things, which helped us then be able to talk about them together in a way that was very respectful and productive, most importantly. That's what I would recommend, because this is where I know a lot, I've read a lot, I've talked to a lot of sex therapists and worked through things, but I'm not a sex therapist, and I cannot recommend them enough.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to have a sex therapist on the show too. I think that'd be so amazing.
Incredible.
Okay, let's talk about the G-spot.
Yes.
Okay, so I think a lot of people, including myself, don't really understand where it is, how to find it, what to do with it. So can we just kind of explain maybe just the basics of it?
Sure. So I teach a lot about menstrual cycle, and the makeup of your vagina and your cervix, they all kind of shift around as you go through your cycle. So there may be a week of the month where you're like, oh my gosh, like this type of stimulation feels amazing. And a lot of times we don't click in that it's because our cervix is more accessible, or because our cervix moves and changes and pulls forward and pulls back, and like that whole tunnel of our vagina changes as we cycle, right? And so if you start to take note of where you're at in your menstrual cycle and what type of stimulation felt good during that time, you might be able to piece together and go, oh, I like cervical stimulation, or you know what, that G-spot area is so much more sensitive during these 2 weeks of my cycle and not as accessible or as easily stimulated during these 2 weeks. So it's interesting that we can even kind of sync some of this up with our cycle. So
can I ask, what are the weeks typically where like the cervix is tighter?
That's on you. So it's not that it's tighter necessarily, it's that it's easier to access. It pulls back while we're ovulating, but might feel extra good because typically during ovulation, sex as a whole, any sort of stimulation just feels better and more amazing, and you're typically more easily stimulated and aroused while you're ovulating. It pulls forward while we menstruate so that we can menstruate. And so for some people, they love sex on their period. They love that cervical stimulation that goes with it. It feels so good. Others hate it. It's too much. There's too much going on in there. Don't want penetration. And that would be a great time for things like maybe mutual masturbation, oral, other things that you could be doing as a team or by yourself.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some ways to stimulate the G-spot?
There are some fantastic toys out there that are specifically made to. I'm a huge fan of the Ioba. It's called the OMG. It's a wand style, but it has a little pearl on it, and it's made for once you insert it, you push the button, and the pearl does almost like a come here type motion. And so that's the classic G-spot stimulation, is the come here motion. You can also put pressure down on your pubic bone.
Like this?
Yep, like this, but it's more like this.
So like a guy could mimic that with his finger.
Exactly. It's a great thing for a partner to do.
Yeah.
And so it's much easier for sure. And then pressure on that pubic bone. We don't always realize that can help kind of enhance whatever stimulation you're doing at the same time.
In terms of like a hand on top, and then I really want this video to turn out so people can see this.
Oh yeah. Well, and here's another, I did some promotion work for a company called Veducated. They are fantastic. I cannot recommend them enough. It is videos of like, here is what clitoral stimulation looks like. Here are a whole bunch of techniques for clitoral stimulation. And you get to see the person stimulating themselves. You can also see a partner stimulating, so you can see, but they have an entire video course that goes just with like external vulva. They have an internal or G-spot type stuff. They have one on anal stimulation. And then they also have like lingam massage, like different types of stimulation you could do on a male partner as well. There is
that's the one I'm most excited about. Never mind.
Right? It's so interesting. But the thing that I like about it, it's very educational. Like it's a real human that you're looking at, but like the videos are really helpful in terms, because sometimes we need to see it. You can read all day long and I can tell you all day long how to do different types of stimulation, but when you actually see what it looks like, I think that sometimes can be the click for a lot of people. Like, oh, I need to try that. I really appreciated have you watched the Goop series yet? Is it on Netflix? I think it's on Netflix. So the third episode, go find this, you guys. It's so educational. I have mixed feelings about Goop and Gwyneth and all of it, but this particular episode was very, very, very helpful. She meets with a very famous sex therapist who actually shows on the video, like, this is the technique that I use that has helped women who have never had orgasms have orgasms, and this is how it works, and this is what it looks like, and you actually get to see what they're doing and how it works, and it's so useful. Like, that knowledge is so cool.
Okay, so that's on Netflix, and then the other one was Veducated.
Like educated. I know, cute, right? Educated, but with a bed on the, so Veducated.
Veducated.
I know.
Is that like a website?
Great. It's a website, and you can sign up for all the different courses, and they have a ton of different courses, but the ones particularly about vaginal stimulation as a whole are it's all yoni massage and things like that, but it's so interesting and very helpful to get to see it, because I feel like I'm fairly familiar with a lot of things, and I still learned so much watching a lot of their stuff. And it's frustrating because a lot of times, you know, when you hear that, people are like, "Why? I've seen porn." Porn is not a good teacher. Porn is not where you should be going to learn the things. It's just not. It's there for other reasons. It's not a good education.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of porn, and I was gonna,
Same.
yeah, I just feel like it, I mean, okay, granted, I haven't really watched a lot, but from what I've heard and from my experiences with men who I think have watched a lot of porn, there's like things that are learned that women don't want or don't like. And it's kind of, again, it kind of feeds into misogyny a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
like treating a woman like this sexual object versus having like a pleasurable experience together.
Yep.
And I mean, it's typically made for men, right? Because it's kind of this dominant thing of,
Mm-hmm.
I can't count the number of guys that have put their hand on my neck without
Mm-hmm.
asking, like
Mm-mm.
right
No,
away. And
no.
it's like, maybe like with a partner that I've been with for a while that I feel really comfortable, but
Yeah.
like, no, you don't do that. And but
No.
that you get that from porn, you
Yep.
know? So
Totally. Emily Nagoski, too, in Come As You Are, talks about how a lot of what we do sexually is learned. The last thing you'd want to do is go learn the wrong stuff. And unfortunately, I feel like porn perpetuates. I don't personally know a ton of women that like being strangled.
mhm.
I just don't. I know that's something that some people do enjoy, and it's not to knock them. It's just that I don't know that we should be going straight to that. But if you've seen it over and over and over again depicted in pornography, it normalizes it in your brain.
Mhm.
Same with all the other things that happen in porn that I would say, generally speaking, in my conversations with normal humans, that's not on their menu, you know?
Like the slapping of the face, the I'm sorry, let me let my dog out for a second.
Yeah.
Um yeah, like the slapping of the face, the spitting in the mouth, the calling someone a dirty whore. It, like,
No.
to me, that's so degrading as a
Yep.
woman. I
Yep.
like, even like coming on someone's face.
Yep.
Like, I just think that's so degrading. But there are some women out there that like to be degraded.
But
Um,
where did we learn that?
well, I agree. I agree. I think it's kind of an insecurity,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe not an insecurity, but like a pain that they're like reliving because they
Oh,
feel,
100%.
yeah.
100%. I mean, even from my own personal experience, I feel like when I was much younger, I wanted someone to be rougher with me. And now I look back and I'm like, I'm so grateful my husband never was and just isn't that type of person. But that really came from years of abuse,
Mm,
you know? And so that's what's so devastating is, you know, if that's all we've seen and that's what we've been exposed to and that's what's been normalized to us, of course that's what we're kind of looking for. And so I would challenge so much of that and say, can you recognize where you learned that? And this is another reason that a sex therapist is not a bad idea. They
mm,
may help you get to the root to some of these things, and have a better understanding of maybe why you do or do not like the things that you want sexually, or why you're trying to do the things that you are, or, you know. So it's, once
mhm,
again, I cannot recommend seeing a therapist enough in general. A sex
mhm.
therapist is fantastic as well.
Yeah. No, we're big on therapy on this podcast. I see a
Yep.
therapist. I've seen her for years. I always tell everyone every episode that I have, I've had two psychologists on. Like, everything is like, go see a therapist.
Just go see a therapist, guys. It's gonna fix everything. But like,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, seriously. What do you have any advice to men who watch a lot of porn and
Don't either.
what'd you say?
Stop.
I agree. Um like who maybe, like, what about men who can only get off like one way or one position, or they're starting to lose a little bit of their like sex drive, and maybe, like, I know I have a friend who he has some sexual hangups where he feels so much pressure when he has
Mm-hmm.
sex that it like is like sometimes it turns him off, or sometimes he doesn't want to have sex, or, you know, because I think a lot of men feel pressure as well. So do you have any advice for them?
So I would love to even speak to like a mixed libido relationship. My husband and I are opposites. I have a much higher libido than my husband. And I think it's a really difficult place to be because as a female, I'm not supposed to be this way, quote, quote, right?
Mm-hmm.
And neither is he. So he feels like something's wrong with him. I feel like he doesn't desire me enough. And then we just end up in just a mess. And the
Mm-hmm.
more I've opened up about this on the Vagina blog, the more I have found my people. It is so interesting how many women I've had come forward and go, I'm not the only one going through this. My husband's not the only one with a lower libido. Because every time I bring it up, people are like, oh, he needs to go have a hormone panel. He's broken. And I'm like, actually, his hormones are totally fine. He actually has high testosterone. This is just who my husband is, and this is who I am. And that's okay. We have been so culturally conditioned to believe that men are gross horn dogs and women are sweet, darling, not interested in sex, but creatures to look at and be pleasured with.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so this turns all of that upside down completely. Like that's not my reality at all. And it's not the reality of a lot of people. And the more we kind of start to talk about this, it's really awesome to kind of hear like, okay, so we're not alone. There's actually a large number that are going through this. It makes me feel really bad for the men going through it. It also has given me a lot of perspective in terms of being the higher libido partner and what that looks like. And so when speaking to men, a couple of things that have really helped me not maybe get my feelings hurt as badly and be respectful is to make it really easy for my partner to say yes. And if you're the lower libido partner, tell your partner how to make it easy for them for you to say yes. So if my husband's in the middle of like a work project or something else, I don't go after him for sex. His head is somewhere else. He's going to say no, and it's going to hurt my feelings to get turned down. And so even if I'm just really needing it so bad, it's just not a good time because it's just going to end up breaking everyone's heart in the situation. And so I tell guys, like, if you want it so bad and they're not into it, like, don't ask. Like, but for the lower libido partner, that looks like making yourself available when you can. And then having this mutual respect. So for me, when I go to ask for sex, I have to look at it like I'm asking for a sandwich and not like I'm asking for someone to love and accept me.
Right.
Because when we start to tie our sexual relationships so deeply into like our worth, which a lot of times we like to do, especially as a higher libido female, when that all gets tied together, the rejection hurts so much worse. When it looks more like, hey, I'm in the mood for a sandwich. Would you mind making me a sandwich? And they go, I just am not super in the mood to eat sandwiches right now. I'm not hurt. My feelings are not hurt. My self-worth is not hurt. And I can go make my own sandwich. Right? And I think when you open that up, this is why this conversation, you got to go to lunch and have this conversation and say, hey, I'm not getting as much sex as I would like. So what are we going to do? And a lot of times, my husband, especially before he had his vasectomy, he was really worried even about pregnancy all the time. High anxiety, worried about getting me pregnant always. And so for him, it was like, okay, so what if we do stuff where it really ensures that I'm not going to get pregnant? What if we masturbate together? What if we do oral? What if we do, so this is the conversation of like, oh, you're suffering from anxiety. You're not rejecting me. Your anxiety is so high that you don't want to have sex with me because you don't want to get me pregnant. What can we do that will for sure not get me pregnant, but will get both of us off and we'll be all happy in the end, right? And that's why this conversation is so important. Because if you don't have this conversation, it looks like a lot of sexual frustration for one partner and a lot of anxiety and frustration for the other partner and hurt feelings all around.
First of all, I love all of what you just said. I have a friend, and this would happen a lot in my past marriage, so I also had the higher libido, and I would, same thing. My feelings would get hurt all the time because I would feel rejected. I also think it's maybe more common than talked about that men sometimes don't finish when you're having sex.
Yeah.
So
that does happen.
Like I had a friend recently who said that happened for like the first time, and she was so upset because
Mhm.
she felt like it was her, like he wasn't attracted to her, or maybe something was happening behind the scenes. So what
Mm.
would you say, first of all, to like men who, we don't want to shame them if that happens, right? Sometimes that just doesn't happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen for women. Most of the time
Yeah,
it
like
doesn't happen for
sometimes
women.
it doesn't happen. Like that's
Yeah,
why we're here to chase pleasure. And
yeah.
you know what? Sometimes pleasure looks like your partner having an orgasm and you not having an orgasm. And it doesn't matter which partner that is. Like there have been a handful of times where I've been like, I don't have the mental capacity to get in the headspace to make this happen right now, but I
Mm-hmm.
would love to have sex with you. So I just need you to know going into it, I may not get there, and that needs to be okay today,
Yeah.
and go into it that way. Or like we've been there too, where we've been at it for like 45 minutes to an hour. We're both like rug burned and just like, this is nice, but we got to call it.
Yeah. What is the optimal time?
There isn't one. Whatever you feel like.
Like
It's one
how,
of those things like we keep trying to set boundaries on all this stuff. None of it exists. What feels good to you? Like you might be like, I love being strangled and I want jizz all over my face. Good. Knock yourself out.
so you just said that.
Yeah,
Is
but I'm
there,
not gonna argue with that. I want you to enjoy your sex life, whatever that looks like. It might look like 2-minute sex and jizz all over your face. Cool.
I mean, sometimes you just gotta have like a quickie,
Yeah.
Like sometimes that's super hot, you know?
Yeah, there is no optimal time. I would say except for parents, and the optimal time is like as quick as you can because the dang kids.
Is there like, oh, I know you said to not set boundaries on these things, but is there like how many times a week should couples try and have sex? Does it matter? Is it okay if they go a month without having sex?
Are both of your sexual needs being met? Is everyone being honest about their sexual needs? Those are the questions you need to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, I have like, I don't want to say my requirements, but just like, here's about what I would love to have, right? Here's what and then it's meeting my partner with him going, okay, but here's what I would like to. Now, where's the middle ground?
Mm-hmm.
Some months we have more sex and some months we have less sex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, depending on what you're going through in life.
Totally.
Yeah. Oh, I had a question and it left my mind. Give me 1 second. Oh, okay. So not talking about relationship. Oh no, wait, hold on. Here's my question.
Mm-hmm.
In a relationship, masturbation,
Mm-hmm.
um, is that appropriate for specifically like for me, I think I would feel self-conscious if my partner was getting off to porn all the time
Yep.
by himself. So
Mm-hmm.
when is masturbation appropriate in a relationship? How often? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that is between you and your partner. We choose not to consume porn in our relationship. And it's funny because people are like, oh, your husband's lying to you. And I'm like, but he's really not. Like, it's just not super something we're into. We have a very open policy on masturbating. I have no problem. And I've told him, like, if the wind hits you right in the shower, knock yourself out. As long as like you're meeting my sexual needs and I'm meeting your sexual needs, masturbation is fully on the table in our relationship. But that's a decision that we've made, with each other. I know for other couples, and it's hard, people really like to marry masturbation and pornography to each other. And I very heavily argue that those two things are not married to each other. You
Mm-hmm.
can so easily have a healthy relationship with masturbation that does not involve pornography at all,
Mm-hmm.
which I've been really surprised to learn that not a lot of people know and understand that. We've really tried to put those two things together. But my argument is 100 years ago, porn didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? Humans were still masturbating.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
like if you wanted, you had to like go to a live show and stuff, right? It just wasn't accessible like it is now. But masturbation was part of a healthy healthy sexual development, right? So we don't need porn to masturbate.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you need porn to masturbate. And I would almost argue too, go masturbate without porn, see where it takes you, because it can be really fun. Like it's
Mhm.
a great, it's a great way to get to know yourself. It doesn't have to be something that you do alone. Mutual masturbation is super fun,
Mhm. I
you know.
totally agree.
hmm So explore all of that. Explore why you believe what you believe around that and what your feelings really are. I think once again, it's another area to going curious, see why you
Mhm.
believe what you do or think the way that you do, and play with stuff. But I don't know. I'm a big advocate for getting away from pornography consumption either way. And if you are going to consume it, are you paying for it? Because
Mhm.
we put a lot more value into the things that we pay for. And when you pay for pornography, you know that it's been ethically created and sourced.
Mhm. Mm.
So that's another thing that a plug that I'd like to kind of put in here too. If you want to consume porn, pay for your porn. You
Mm.
will then have a different attitude towards it, I think.
Mm. So I actually always, when I start talking to a guy, at some point before I've slept with them, um, I always ask, "Do you watch porn?"
Yeah.
And most of the guys, like 95%, say, "Yeah." And I say, "Well, how often do you watch it?" And then they'll tell me. And then I say, "Well, is that the only thing that you masturbate to?"
Mm-hmm.
And if it is, for me, that is a little bit of like, I don't know, because then is that what you're thinking about if we were to have sex?
Yep.
Or is that the only way you can get off? So
Yep.
I've actually challenged a couple guys, and one of them I was talking to, he's like, "Yeah, I haven't been watching porn because you really like shed some light on
Yep.
how it really is a horrible representation of how men treat women."
Yeah.
It
It
really,
is.
it is. And I've also like, it's also, I've heard some sex advice from a male. I don't remember where I heard it, but he was saying like, for men, you don't want to masturbate the same way every time. You know, try using your imagination, you know,
Yeah.
try using lube, so that you're not only stimulated in one way. And I'm assuming for women, that's probably the same thing as well, right?
Well, one of the questions I ask as soon as I talk about toys is, can I get addicted to my vibrator? No and yes is kind of the answer. If you are finding that you cannot get off any other way, but you could before,
Mm,
right? Maybe take a break or
mhm,
switch up your toys, try a different toy. And for people who have asked too, like you did earlier, like I'm only orgasming with my vibrator. You know what? Thank heavens we have vibrators. Let's just be
mhm,
grateful. Let's have a little gratitude practice around vibrators because
mhm,
how great is that? I mean, it's so frustrating. People really love to put shame on toys,
mhm,
and go, oh, I don't need those. And I'm like, it's not always a need. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes
mhm,
it's an exploration. And you know what? Sometimes it is a need. And do you really want me to never have orgasms again if that was my need?
mhm,
And as soon as people are faced with that, it kind of helps them just re-swallow those awful words that they said
mhm,
because I'm done. I'm done with the shame around all of it. I'm done with people being judgy. It doesn't make any sense. Everyone deserves orgasms. Everyone deserves a good time and to have like a sexually healthy, beautiful relationship. And if that looks like incorporating a toy or a vibrator and that helps you get there,
yeah,
why are we sad? Why
yeah.
would we be sad about that?
I agree. So I'm curious of your thoughts on this. So I've told a few men that I had been talking to that, I can only come with a vibrator. That's just
Mhm.
how it's always been for me. And
Mhm.
how I would love to someday, if I'm in a committed relationship, explore and try
Yeah.
other things. But for right now, it works, it gets the job done. And, multiple of them have said, "Oh, I can't wait to, like, I'm going to change that." Like,
Challenge accepted.
challenge accepted. And you know what? It drives me nuts because what it does is it makes me feel like there's something wrong with me. Like they're saying
Mhm.
like, "Oh, well, I'm going to change that." And so now there's pressure on me that it needs to be changed. And then
Mhm.
there's pressure like if we were to have sex that I'd be like disappointing them, right?
Yeah.
That it's like this self-confidence thing on their part. Again, going back to like the pressure that the man's supposed to provide the orgasm or whatever. So I don't know. What is your thought? What would be your what's the word I'm looking for? Not rebuttal, but like, it's the morning. I'm not a morning person.
No, you're good.
What would you say to a guy that said that to me? That, oh, I can't, challenge accepted. We're gonna make it happen without it.
It's hard because my sexual experience has been with a committed partner, which comes with all of the vulnerability and intimacy of like a marriage, right? So I've slept with my husband and that's it. So this is an area where I would be like, go see a sex therapist. This would be a good conversation to have with a sex therapist who specializes in this, because it's just not an area of expertise for me. And because that has been my experience and this is what I can speak to, I think I would probably struggle personally being with different partners that I wasn't intimately tied to in every other area of my life. I have like very close friends who have a completely different stories and have had this same struggle. So I would say that I don't think that this is unique at all. And I think it does come with being with partners. Cause I mean, my husband, by the time we got married, we'd been dating a year, we got married, we were married to each other. So there's that very deep, like we're committed type of that's our framework. And so I invested in him too, in terms of like teaching him like, this is what I like and this is what I don't like. I think that would be that would be a lot to do with multiple partners. That's a lot of learning. That's a lot of opening up. That's a lot of vulnerability. That's a lot to ask from someone. That's a lot to give to people more than one time. So it's funny because I joke all the time, like we can't get divorced because I don't want to have to teach someone else all the things. It's too hard and I'm too old and I'm too tired and we have these kids. And so we joke all the time that we vowed to kill each other before we get divorced.
Yeah. And I totally understand what you're saying. And I will say this, while I don't want to, I want to be sure that I'm not shaming any woman who.
No, same. That's the thing. Like, I just can't speak to this because it's not my experience. It's not a judgment thing at all on my part.
And but what I'm saying though is I agree with you. Like for me, because I had been married and then I went through kind of this phase where I started to explore and be with different partners. And then I found out very quickly that does not work for me. That I need that emotional intimacy.
I think most people do, male and female. We don't want to face this. We really want things to be tender, easy. And of course, I'm sure there's some really like a lot of fun to be had in that. But if you want like sexual development, I do think that you need to get into that relationship with yourself, because the best, like the most important sexual relationship you can ever have is the one that you have with your own body. But B, when you start to take on a partner, that's a lot to invest in someone and a lot of vulnerability to share with someone that maybe you don't know where that relationship's going yet,
Yes, definitely. And I think also like if you sleep with someone and you're not emotionally intimate with them yet, there's almost this sense of anxiety or insecurity that comes afterwards that I think people don't really talk about. And I'm in a dating coaching program right now. And we were kind of talking about this, how if you sleep too soon, okay, just recognize it and then have a conversation with that person being like, hey, that was really vulnerable for me. It scares me a little bit. I just kind of want to make sure we're in the same place if we have sex again, or maybe I need to wait a little bit, or I just needed to like voice that before that happened again.
I think that's fair. It's really hard because I think people avoid this topic. They like don't want to like, we want to pretend like sex is this really easy, casual, fun thing that we're all just can do and it's no big deal and it's fun and casual and fun. But for me, sex has been like a very core part of an extremely committed relationship, that has deep and intimate and vulnerable and all these things. And so I have a hard time picturing it being anything else because that is what I know. And I can speak to the value in that. And so that's the other thing that's hard. Like, I'm so grateful that this is the way that I've done it, because I don't have some of the harm that can come. I mean, I'm missing out maybe on some of the fun, but I do think that there's a lot of harm that can come as well, with being overly casual. Like, one of my very, very closest friends is like, I don't know if I can stand by my lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so to hear her speak so candidly about that and just be like, there's pros and cons, and we never talk about the cons. We only talk about that I'm super cool and fun because I'm totally okay with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think more people are not actually okay with it, but they're not saying it because
Yep.
society is telling us that it's fine, that
Yep.
it's like, you should go out and sleep with multiple partners and be,
Yeah.
casual sex is okay and all that.
Yeah.
And I just think I'm not necessarily going against that, but I think
Yeah.
that it hits people deeper than they know.
I would
Okay.
agree.
Yeah.
But that's once again coming from a very limited standpoint of
Yes.
myself.
Yeah. And I do have girlfriends who can have casual sex and they're fine,
Yeah.
So, and then I have my thoughts about that too, in terms of like, well, are you suppressing emotions? Like, are you suppressing pain from your childhood? And this is fulfilling it in some way. But, okay, I think that the last topic I want to kind of bring up, I've had a lot of women reach out to me asking me to talk about healthy body image. And I think this can come into play a lot with sexuality, because a lot of women, if they're not comfortable with their physical appearance or they're insecure about something, that it can create like some blocks, some roadblocks in terms of feeling confident to start seeing a new partner, or even confident in a relationship if maybe their bodies change. So I just kind of want to talk about that a little bit and get your opinion.
My first thoughts, bringing this up, there's a couple, there's so many really. Like, for example, I've had people be like, yeah, this guy was like, well, if you're not completely clean shaven, I'm not into it. So your response should not be to go out and shave everything clean. Your response should be like, oh, too bad for you.
Yeah,
I guess
I love that.
then.
Yeah.
Like, stand by your body. If you don't like being clean shaven, you do not have to be clean shaven. If you do like it, knock yourself out. But if you don't, and you're like, no, I'm a trimmer, I trim, or I'm a full bush girl. If you don't like full bush, I'm so sorry. I guess I'm not for you. So some of these very simple things, what do you actually like? Let's go find those, and then find someone who will stand by them. And I think you can make some adjustments here and there, but when it comes down to it, that's the key. And that helps. Those are the building blocks of starting to get away from the self-loathing that we've all normalized. Finding out what it is you like about yourself, what it is that you want to, like, maybe you have short hair and you want to keep your short hair. Maybe you want to, break out of these like perfection type of, mentalities. Every single male I've ever spoken to, I'm like, what's bad boobs? And they're like, there's no such thing. All boobs are good boobs. All boobs are good boobs. So I think sometimes maybe even go into that with that type of mindset, like all boobs are good boobs. And if someone says otherwise, maybe that's not who you want to be having sex with.
Yeah.
I love Beauty Redefined is one of my absolute favorite Instagram accounts to follow. If you are not following them, go follow them right now. They talk a lot about body neutrality, and that is recognizing that your body is just a house for who you are. It gets us away from this, like, I love all my flaws, to I don't need to care about my flaws. That's not what's important. What's important is that this body stays healthy and houses who I am. That's what's important. People should be wanting to be with me, and I should want to be with me. And whatever the house looks like doesn't really matter, because all it is a house. So it's really stepping into that. And I would tell people the best place to start is to identify maybe where you are suffering from self-loathing or self-hatred. Break that. Get away from that. Fix that. Work on that. maybe it's not that you're in love with yourself, but you need to stop hating yourself. If you're exercising out of self-hate, maybe it's time to evaluate your exercise program. I was really surprised going into the Taylor Swift documentary. I did not think I would love it so much, but watching it
was so good.
Right. But for her to be like, I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to be on the edge of like fainting and passing out and dying after every single day, after every single show. I just thought that was normal, that's, you know, and now that I'm eating, now that I'm not bone thin, I'm realizing like, you're not supposed to feel like that all the time. I just thought that's how people felt all the time. And it's stuff like that, recognizing like, I shouldn't feel like I'm going to die every time I work out. I shouldn't be working out because it's miserable and I hate it, but it's fixing my broken body that I hate. What's motivating your actions? You shouldn't feel hungry all the time. That's no way to live. You know, it's all these types of things. You shouldn't be faking orgasms. You should be enjoying and chasing pleasure and having good sexual experiences with yourself, with your partners. That it should be. So start to identify some of these areas where maybe self-loathing and self-hatred has become your normal. Fix that. Get to a place of neutrality. And if you end up falling in love with your flaws in the meantime and falling in love with yourself, it's just the best. Like, I went through serious eating disorders through high school and young adulthood. When I got pregnant with my first, I have a disorder called hyperemesis gravidarum, so I can't keep food down while I'm pregnant. And it's the worst. So to fight for my life, I suddenly had this very healthy respect for my body. Like, holy cow, we're going through the worst thing ever, me and my body together. And like, you're doing it, like you're surviving this. And then to go from that into like delivering her, I had a very empowering experience delivering her and then nursing her. I was like, I just survived 9 months of no food. And somehow I'm now creating food for a whole nother person that I made with my body. Like, it gave me this all new respect for my body. And I vowed that I would never mistreat my body the way that I had before. Because at that point, we'd been through so much together. And it's sad that I needed to go through that much trauma in order to get there. And I would argue that it is so much better to just skip the trauma and just get there.
Did you have that with every pregnancy?
Yep.
So how did you get nutrition?
My third, I actually ended up doing a PIC line, which was really great. So that was like liquid for like, it was essentially like Gatorade straight to my veins. It was like, it's a central line. And then that being hydrated like that, and then all the medication I was on kind of helped me just kind of keep bits of food down here and there. You'd be amazed how little food you can survive on. It's so cool. But going through that 3 times and going through that period, it really does kind of slam the door on like, I'm done hating myself. I'm done doing anything else because I feel like I need to keep up with some weird standard that doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah. That's such a powerful message, because I think oftentimes, well, especially with social media and what the normal is of, you know, small waist, big ass, fake boobs, big lips, you know, tight skin. And I mean, even right now, like, I'm going through this kind of like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how many wrinkles I had on my face.
Oh yeah,
like,
same.
You know, and it's like, well, I'm 33. I've been through hell and back with my divorce and trauma that I've been through. And like, yeah, like I've got some cellulite and maybe my abs don't show the way that I like them to, but I exercise and I eat healthy, and I'm trying not to feel guilty when I eat carbs, and it's okay to have ice cream. And, you know, it's like, I just have to kind of like, it's every day. You have to tell yourself like, that your body is like shows your strength. Like, it shows what you've been through. And like, if you start exercising and kind of eating better and you start seeing results, great. But like, you're right. You have to come to it first with that you love your body. And because if you come to it with like, you hate yourself, you'll never love it. You'll just never love it.
I've lost the weight before. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't fix anything. It's nice to maybe have an easier time finding clothes, and that's about it for me. So that's the thing that's hard is I'm kind of at a crossroads right now too, where like for my health, I probably need to lose some weight. I have PCOS. It's like a whole thing. And so working through like, okay, what does this look like in a very healthful, loving way? Because I'm also like, life, you get one life to live, and that life needs to include chocolate cake. Like it doesn't feel right for it not to. And
Yes.
so I'm like, I want to be healthy enough that I'm in a healthy range and where I'm supposed to be, but never ever so crazy that chocolate cake isn't part of my life. And I think that's the best way to live.
Mhm. Yes. No, I totally agree. I totally agree. And I love that message. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Do you have any like last words of advice or wisdom for my listeners about healthy sexuality or anything to do with sex or body image?
I think the most important thing, we really, as females especially, do not prioritize sexual health and happiness.
Hmm.
It is not a priority because it's swept under the rug as taboo and not worthy of our time and our energies. And I would like to challenge that.
Hmm.
Having enjoyable sex, getting off regularly, whatever that looks like for you, is worthy of your time. It is worthy of the investment that it takes to figure out what that is, whether that's hiring a sex therapist, buying a toy, going to lunch to have the conversation about it.
Mhm.
It's worthy. You are worthy of sexual pleasure and enjoyment in your life. It
Hmm.
is completely something that you should pursue. I think we're so quick to pursue every other diet that ever comes out ever. We'll buy the books on it. We'll read all the books. We'll buy all the food. We'll do all the things. We'll do the weird exercise programs. We'll hire a trainer. We'll do all that crap, right? Stop doing all that. Buy the sex books. Hire the sex therapist. Buy the toys.
Yeah.
Pursue this and fall in love with yourself. Fall in love with your partner. Fall in love with sex. Have fun with it because it is so completely worth it. Find ways to make it easy for yourself. Find ways to make it easy for your partner, whatever that looks like. And a lot of times too, that looks like hiring a babysitter and going away for a weekend. That looks like going out on regular dates, whatever it takes to romance yourself too.
Mhm.
For me, I wish my husband would plan a date night and take me out every Friday night and I didn't have to worry about it. It's just not in it won't happen.
Mhm.
When I'm on the date, I'm never sad that I'm the one that hired the babysitter and picked out the restaurant and made it happen. When I get there, I'm not sad that it was me and not my husband. I'm glad I'm on a date. And it contributes to me having a healthy sex life.
Mhm.
So it's some of these things like take responsibility for some of this, realize that it's worth it and do it. And never, ever fake orgasms. Never.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. I really appreciate all of your wisdom, and I'm so excited for my listeners to hear this.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me. I so
Of
appreciate
course.
it.
I can't wait to continue to kind of listen to your podcast and read about your blog. And I love all the resources that you gave as well. So thank you again.
Good. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so after stopping, you'll receive an email notification when okay.
Mhm.